man. Like these calls
Yeah.
are recorded, right? Like we can always come back, but
Yeah.
got to make sure you take care of your body. So let's go ahead and get started 2 minutes after. Let people kind of trickle in. And so welcome everyone to our weekly call. This week is finance. So if you're new to Heroes Veritas, or if you haven't been in the portal that much, the finance is, we just tried to keep the F's together, right, within the Heroes Parthenon, just for some alliteration. But it's really about business. It's about money. It's about stability. It's about, filling the coffers, making sure that you have enough to live on, subsidize whatever life it is you want to choose to live. And so before we get started, as always, if you know anybody that could really benefit from the portal, make sure to let them know about us. We grow faster when you help us grow. We also have Sovereign Summit coming up, Sovereign Summit. I don't know why that came out so odd. Just didn't land right. Sovereign Summit in June. We're really excited for that. That's a three and a half day course where we just pour everything into you guys, everything we know, we teach. We have coaches coming out, speakers coming out to get you guys to that next level. So if you haven't checked that out, be sure to do that. That is a listed event in the portal as well as on our website. If you want more information, you can check that out there. So you'd be looking for Sovereign Summit. You can search the portal or go to our website and search there. This month, upcoming month, so it's January. So upcoming month in February, we will be having another public event. This one will be a premium event. We are partnering with Tish's Gym. So if you haven't met Tish, be sure to connect with her for a powerlifting event. So we'll be the sponsor over there at that. So we'll have our little, I'll be supporting the event. And then at the end of it, we'll do a little spiel, talk, answer questions, have a little bit of a meal before we close out the event. So if you are in the area, highly recommend coming out, checking it out. It's a lot of fun. If you've never been to a powerlifting event, they're very high energy. It's really cool to watch people lift really heavy weights and see them kind of put their bodies to the test and all that time that they put into their journey, right? Tish is our local powerlifting champion. She's internationally recognized as a powerlifter. So, her hosting her own event is really great. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of celebrate people that put the time in, put the effort in, which is all about what Heroes preaches, right? Putting the time, doing the due diligence, and committing yourself to something that you enjoy and can leave your mark on the world. And so we'll be doing that. Again, we're really focused on getting out and connecting. If you didn't make it out to the S's today, are just not landing. I don't know why. Didn't make it out to the Sovereign Soiree last week or last weekend. That was an absolute blast. We got to sit down and hang out with some really great people, talk about the vision, talk about the mission. We got to honor Erin. If you haven't connected with her, be sure to connect with her own death ceremony, celebrating the figurative death of the person she was, and giving her a launch pad to where she's going and who she's trying to become. And as we move throughout the year, we're gonna do that more often. We want to have those public events. We really do believe that while it's great we can all get it together virtually, it really isn't the same as in person. And we really saw that last weekend when we hung out together with some members, some non-members, and really connected energetically for a couple hours. And it really is different. And so throughout the year, we're going to be hosting these. With that being said, if you have a place that you want to offer up for us to come out and set something up, reach out to me, Matt, or Tish, and let us know, because I'm not against traveling. Tish isn't against traveling if we can make it work. And again, it's really about the community. So if we can connect with you guys and you have a place for us to do so, let us know, and let's start getting things on the calendar. Let's start setting up events where you can bring your family, friends, and really share with them what we're trying to accomplish. And that was my big takeaway from Sovereign Soiree last weekend, is that's where I thrive. That's my space, is going out and connecting with you as our community, and connecting with people that you think would benefit from our community, who maybe don't understand or don't know what's going on, and me being able to sit down with them and really explain the progressive level up that our community provides to each other in a space where it's not just across a screen, which I've said it many, many times. As much as technology allows us to connect virtually, it really does provide a very vast disconnect from the energetic side of the house, and you just don't get the same experience. And so again, if you guys have a place, reach out to one of us three. You can even reach out to Gavin, our fitness director, or Deborah, our community director, and they can help square that away as well. All right. So if there's any questions, hold them to the end, as far as either what I just talked about with the, the admin stuff, or even the topic, and we'll get to them. But today we're going to be talking about finance. And I mentioned it earlier. This pillar isn't just about money. It's about building businesses. It's about creating a place of creativity for yourself, so that you feel like you have added to the world, and you've brought something to the world. And so that usually is in the form of business and finance, because the reality is we can't really thrive if we're in survival mode. And so today, me, Tish, and Matt talk about this every week, kind of where we're going with our business. And it always brings some very unique perspectives and some unique experiences, building a business and trying to ramp it up and get it fast and scale it and all these things. And one of the things that the three of us have really identified is priorities change. And so because priorities change, money becomes more or less important. And so when we talk about sovereignty, most people consider sovereignty from a money perspective is oftentimes exaggerated. And what I mean by that is, when I talk with people, a lot of times I'm like, how much money do you want to make a year? And they're like, I want to make $1 million a year. And in talking with them and asking those questions of, well, where did that number come from? Probably 98% of people have no idea where that number came from. They have no idea why the number is $1 million. Generally speaking, it's a nice round number that kind of carries with it some social promise and some social clout that they just have latched onto, but they haven't actually decided what that means, how to give that up, what sacrifices they're willing to do. And so it then becomes this kind of self-deprecating cycle of, well, I'm not making $1 million, so therefore I'm failing, which then creates this place where they can't make $1 million. Hey, Tish, can you go ahead and mute your...
my bad, sorry.
Much appreciated. So when you talk about, finance, it really has to come from a very intentional place on what you actually need. And so that's what we want to cover today, is giving you those tools to become intentional about how much money you actually need. Because if all of us are honest with ourselves, especially, you might not be if you're in the group and you're 18 or 20, you might not have gone through that experience. But those of us who are gotten through our 20s, we've lived off of, $400 a week. And we've also lived off of, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, so you realize how much of it is just habits. It's prioritization. It's deciding what's important to you. And so I wanted to really hammer home how you pull that apart. So first, the first step across the board, and I kind of touched on it here a moment ago, is really understanding what you need. What do you actually need? Is it $1 million a year? Because even spending $1 million a year, unless you're actively going out and living a high life, $1 million a year is a lot of money to spend. Unless you're building a business and you're using it to double down on assets and things like that, I don't think people have an actual understanding, especially if they've never seen $1 million, how much $1 million is. And so when you're prioritizing, getting clear on what you want, start with the outcome. I think a lot of people start with the number, right? They start with, I want $1 million, and it's just a math problem, right? At $1 million, if I sell $10,000 programs a month for 12 months, then I'm at 1.2 million. It was like just a math problem, right? But the problem is, what most people will realize is making your first million is literally the hardest that you can do, because you don't have the capital to double down and multiply your dollars. And there's a lot of lessons that have to be learned in the fray of getting to that $1 million. And so most people who start with that number never make it to the number, not because it's not possible, but because they give up before they get there, because they have no understanding of why they want $1 million. So when things get hard, things go sideways, things don't work out, they're not at $1 million within 3 months. Patience is another part of it. They end up quitting because it's harder than they thought. And because it's harder than they thought, they also have nothing to fall back on and say, okay, well, I wanted $1 million because, you know, I need to buy this thing for my family to save their life, right? If you need $1 million to save a family member's life, that's a very different impetus than I want $1 million so I can drive a sports car and hang out with, you know, the mucky mucks and rub elbows with rich people. It's a different urgency, and it's a different priority set. And so the first thing you have to do is get very clear on what it is you want, what kind of life you want to live, and why you want to live that life. Because that's gonna help you during the dark times. It's gonna help you down the turn down times. And our team talks about it very often, right? You know, when it comes to Heroes Veritas, our biggest focus is impact. But in order for us to have an impact, we also have to have a monetary value associated with that, right? We want to build a ranch. We want to, you know, connect with a lot of people. We want to host these big events where we can really change people's lives. That takes money, right? It takes money to bring speakers in. It takes money to host a place and let people get a safe environment. It takes money to have DJs and photographers and videographers. We're paying people for their skills. And early on, we started talking about that. And we're like, man, there's no way we're going to get there. But the reality for us was we started to shift our priority to people. And when we did that, it afforded us things like Sovereign Soiree. Yes, it took some overhead for us to go and host the Sovereign Soiree, but the point was the people. So for us, we just did what we possibly could in that space and gotten connected with the people. And it took away the urgency of like, okay, well, we need to have a $1.2 million business a year to make an impact. Well, we don't. So our priority became people, our priority became community. And because that became our priority, $1 million, $1.2 million, whatever revenue the business coaches and the mentors out there will tell you we need, we realized we weren't playing the same game. We were playing the game of impact, not the game of finance. And so where most people land when they start to actually think about it, it's more of a feeling that they're looking for than it is stuff or money. Right. So if you're, to give an example, if, you know, there's a story that I've heard a lot that I absolutely love is you have this guy, he's down in Mexico. He gets on a boat. He goes out on his boat. He fishes. Brings back 1 or 2 fish after a couple hours, and then sits on the beach with his friends drinking for the rest of the day. And this American businessman comes down and says, "Hey, you're a great fisherman." And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, so why do you only go out for a couple hours and fish a couple fish and then quit? You need to be out there fishing all day long and bringing as much as you possibly can and get all this money." And he's like, "Well, why?" "Well, because once you have all this money, then you can build a business and have people do it for you." And he goes, "Okay, well, why?" "Well, because then you can own multiple boats and then you don't have to be on the boat to get the fish." He goes, "Okay, why?" "Well, then after a few years, you invested in the stock market and you got all this money and it's coming in with no work." And he goes, "Okay, why?" "So then you can go hang out with your friends and family on the beach." He's like, "Yeah, but that sounds like it takes 40 years. And the guy from America is like, "Yeah, that's what it takes. You got to sacrifice for 40 years. He goes, "Yeah, but I could do that now by going out fishing for 2 fish and coming back and hanging out with my friends on the beach right now, because that's all I care about. I don't care about investing. I don't care about owning the business. I don't care about owning the boats. I don't care about having employees. I don't care about having an exuberant amount of money. The money that I make right now affords me the life that I want right now. Why do I have to sacrifice if I have it right now?" And so that's a very important story for a lot of people because they don't realize they're being pushed down a path by people who are not on the same course as them. The businessman cared about the clout. He cared about the process of becoming a great businessman, having a bunch of money, but the outcome was exactly the same. The businessman wanted the business that led to sitting on the beach with his family and having freedom. The fisherman just wanted the freedom, which he already had. So cut out the middleman. And so this is why it's telling, because it's really important to really adjust your perspective on what actually matters to you. And to talk about another story, this one's more personal. I was there for this. A woman says, "I'm trying to write a book." And this guru says, "Okay, well, why?" And she talks about all these things. And he goes, "Yeah, but you're still not telling me why," right? She mentioned, "I want to sell the book. I want to make some money on the book." He's like, "So the book is to make money?" And she says, "No." And he's like, "Well, why do you want the book?" And she says, well, I want people to know what I know. He's like, okay, then write the book and give it away for free. Why are you selling it? Because if the point is to get them to know what you know, then you don't need to sell it because you don't care about the money. You want them to know what you know. So why are you focused on selling the book? So the reasons we do these things is very important. And when it relates to sovereignty, it is most important to know those things. Because if you're being pushed down a path to, say, make $1 million, build a business that is publicly traded, and you have all these nice cars, and when you first started, you just wanted to make an impact, eventually you're going to become disingenuous, and the authenticity behind yourself is going to be lost, and you're no longer sovereign because now you're on a path that somebody else put you on. You're now on a path to make things important that are not important to you. And so there's an exercise that I do with all of my one-on-one clients that I always encourage everybody to do, which is sit down and really identify what the outcome is. Really sit down and detail out the life you want to lead. What does it look like? And 9 times out of 10, what most people start with is, I want this nice car. I want this big house. I want this plot of land. I want all the girls. I want all the guys. Right? And then as they think more, it's like, well, why do I want those things? Because I want to feel successful. Okay, what is success for you? And you start asking better questions that align with who you want to be, not who other people say you should be. And so that's step 1, is really becoming clear on where you want to go and why you want to go there. Once you do that, you have to look at what that life is going to cost you from a monetary standpoint, right? Going back to the fisherman and the businessman. Fisherman just wants to hang out on the beach. He can do that in a couple hours, going out, getting a couple fish, cook the fish up on the beach with his friends, and now he's spending all day. He's eating well, he drank beer, he's hanging out, he's having a good time. That life is very inexpensive. But for the businessman wants to sacrifice 40 years, which is to me, that's the most valuable commodity that he just wasted, because he gave up 40 years of that life when he could have had 40 years of that life, because he could have done it right then. The amount of money and stress and like fear and all these things that come with building a business, having a team. Maybe that's what he wanted in the first place, is he wanted to have that, but it doesn't sound like it from the exchange. They want the same outcome, they just have different approaches. And so how much is it actually going to cost you to have that life? Right? I recently had somebody that's like, I just want to travel. I just want to hike all the time. I just want to be in nature all the time. It's like, well, how much money do you need to do that? And they gave me some astronomical number. Like, they need like 2 million in the bank. They need to be making 250,000 to 400,000 a year. And I'm like, why? Nature's free. What does it really cost you to be in nature all the time? Time, which you're giving up if you go and try and make 2 million in the bank. And now you don't have the time to go and do those things. It costs gas, right? You got to travel there, gas and maintenance on a vehicle. Well, in general, even with current gas prices and inflation, like, you can get pretty much anywhere on a tank of gas for $100, $150. And that's if you have a diesel truck, right? Like, and you're spending all this money on gas. You're taking a truck 200 miles. It's going to cost you a couple $100. But if you got like a little Honda, it's going to cost you probably $50 to get wherever you want to go. Okay, so you need $50. So time, $50, and then food, maybe $100, right? Well, you could do that on a minimum wage job, because on a minimum wage job, you can work 20 hours. You can get your $100 for gas. You can get your $50 for food, or $100 for food. Well, what about bills? What about children? What about this? Okay, well, now you're adding factors that are different to what you're talking about, right? We all have responsibilities. And that brings us to the third part of that conversation, right? We started with define where your outcome is, define what it's going to cost you, and then 3, add in all the factors that are going to hinder you, right? And I oftentimes get parents who kind of lose their shit with me when I say hinder and I talk about their children. They're like, my children aren't a hindrance. They're definitely a factor, right? Because if they weren't there, you would have more time, you'd have more money, you'd have more. They're definitely a factor. And if you don't actively factor them in a positive way, and prioritize them in a positive way, you're going to resent them because you're going to start to see them as the reason you don't go live this life you want. You're going to start to see them as the reason you can't do what you want to do. And I see this a lot. And for me, it's a pet peeve to no end. If I see a parent blame their kids for they can't go to the gym, they can't build a business, they can't live their dreams, like, I lose my shit. It is a quick way to like have me tell you you're full of shit. Because the reality is what they're doing is they're placing the responsibility of their life on their children, and it's supposed to be the other way around. You're responsible for their life. They are not responsible for your life. So when you start to say, I can't because I have children, I can't do that because I'm a parent, I'm a mom, I'm a dad, or whatever, you are A, disempowering yourself from making a choice that is your choice, right? And B, placing it at the feet of the kids who had no choice in being in this world in the first place. Like, own your shit, take full responsibility for the life you have, and then you'll be able to be in a better position to say, listen, I don't go to the gym because it's not a priority. I'd rather spend time with my kids, right? That's a different conversation than I can't because my kids are in the way. So you start adding all those factors in. So the life you want, how much is it really going to cost? What are the factors that you have to overcome? What are the hurdles you have to overcome? And now you have a much more full picture. And so when you start looking at having a full picture, the benefit of that, and Tish and I were talking about this just before everybody hopped on, life is going to throw you curves. It's literally going to take the feet out from underneath you, knock the wind out of you, and it's going to test you on whether or not you really want that life. Now, if you haven't done the work to identify how, like, what you want, how much it's going to cost, and kind of identify the hurdles, it's going to knock you a lot harder than if you had. Because now you have no planning. So when it hits you, you're like, fuck me. Like, this is what this takes. I quit. Versus if you look at that and you have the hurdles identified, and you have these things, now you can have kind of a pre-planned mental shift of like, when that happens, how do I overcome it? When that happens, what do I do with it? Right. And what we were talking about is like, I'm a big prescriber of like more money, more problems. Right. The number one issue that people that get money complain that they had to overcome and realize is that they had an idea that when they had more money, it was going to be easy. Everything was going to be simple. Everything was going to be whatever. And then they got all this money and then it wasn't. Right. The more money you have, the more hands come out wanting to pilfer your coffers, right? Especially from our government. Right. If I make $1 million, how much do you think the government's going to take at a 47% tax rate? It's close to $500,000 that you're just, and it's going to be a hard check to write. You're going to be like, oh, can't believe I'm writing this fucking check. Right. And if you don't plan for those things, if you don't think that things through, if you haven't done that due diligence of like, what is the outcome? Well, how much do I need? What are the hurdles? And then when that hand comes out and they're like, all right, you owe us, $470,000. You're going to feel blindsided by it. But if you realize it's coming in and life just kind of ebbs and flows like that, you'll be able to prepare for it a little bit better. And you can't plan for everything, right? That's one thing that I would also articulate is like, whatever you put on paper, realize that you're not going to be able to foresee everything. So even with your best laid plans, even with your best intentionality, you're still going to get knocked. You're still going to get hit from the side. You're still going to have to, you kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps from time to time and realize, I didn't see this coming and I just got to make it work. And the most successful people I know are the people that don't go into their pity parties. Right. And I was guilty of this, especially in my 20s, when things would go sideways. I'd either blame something or I'd whine about it, or I'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'd just sit there and I'd wallow. What I learned from the most successful people that I've been around is they give themselves like 30 seconds to be like, oh, fuck, this sucks. And then after that, it's planning. What do I do from here? What's the next step? How do I get out of this? How do I move forward from this? How do I, what options do I have? You're not always going to have a good option, right? It may be shitty option versus shittier option, but there are always options. And I was recently having a conversation around minimum wage hikes, living expenses, right? And one of the things that I realize is, socially speaking, we are no longer resourceful. That's why we have the detriment that we have. When I was younger, I made $13 an hour. I lived with 3 people. That's resourceful. We shared grocery bills. We shared our utility bills. We shared our housing bills. Why? Because it wasn't because I had to, right? I could have worked more hours. I could have got a second job. I could have done a lot of things, but I wanted the freedom. I didn't want to work weekends. I didn't want to work nights. I didn't want to work grave, right? Those were my choices. As a result, I didn't have a lot of money. Everything is about how you prioritize. And so when you look at, and the reason I bring up that conversation of like the minimum wage thing is because there's this notion that if they are required, if a business is required to pay you more, then your life will get easier. It will not. If you haven't learned how to spend it properly, how to prioritize properly, how to allocate properly, your life will actually get harder. If you go from making $13 an hour to $20 an hour overnight, and you haven't learned the skills to balance a checkbook, which I know that's something a lot of people nowadays don't understand, is checks, right? Because they just swipe. But if you haven't learned those mechanisms, going from $13 an hour to $20 an hour is a whole eye-opening experience. You know, when I went from $15 to $20 an hour, I lost money. My take-home pay was less. Why? Because when I went from $15 to $20 an hour, my tax bracket changed. When my tax bracket changed, the government took more money, and therefore my take-home was less. If you don't learn the skills to manage that, to allocate your money properly, you're actually just asking for more problems. You're actually just trying to put yourself behind an 8 ball on this assumption that things are better. Same thing with, you know, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to go party. I wanted to go club. I wanted to go dance. I wanted to drink. I wanted to do all these things with my friends. Cool. But that also meant towards the end of the month, I was a little tight. Because instead of stashing that $300 that I spent over 2 weekends of drinking and hanging out and driving and getting new clothes, I didn't have it for the bills. So I quite literally prioritized having fun and looking cool over food. And you can make an argument, oh, things are too expensive. And no, I just don't spend it on that. So if you want true sovereignty, you have to understand where you're at, where you're trying to go, and what matters to you. Because I can stretch $800 a month. Most people who I know, because I grew up very poor, very, very poor, we have a lot of people in a single house to make $800 per person stretch. Did we have the best food? No. Do we have the nicest cars, the nicest house, the most luxury items? No. But I'll tell you right now, those were my happiest times. I felt less stressed then than I do now. Because it was my money. And I kept it. And I got to choose where to put it. The more money I've made, the less it's my money. More money I've made, the bigger and nicer the house, bigger and nicer the car. The more often I ate out, the more often I felt entitled to going and playing and having luxury items, having nice phones, having nice computers, right? Having nice things. Not realizing that I now actually have less sovereignty spending all that money over here than when I was poor. Because when I was poor, I was spending things on necessity. When you have more money and you have excess, you're spending it on luxury. The beauty of that is you have the choice to spend on necessity and keep, or spend on luxury. I cannot tell you how many arguments I get in with people who say, I hate how much it costs to live. It actually doesn't cost a lot to live. It costs a lot to live well. It costs a lot to have fun. It costs a lot to have luxury items, but to actually exist, it doesn't cost a lot. You don't believe that? Go check out what the cost of rice is. Go check out what the cost of fruit is. 12 cents a banana. If I was okay with eating rice, chicken, and bananas all day, every day, it would cost me like $10 a day to eat. That's not expensive. If I was okay living in a 1-bedroom apartment, not in the best neighborhoods, I could probably get away with a rent of $500-600 a month. But then you start adding in the hurdles, the desires, the wants. That's when it becomes expensive. I know people that will tell me they don't have enough money to eat healthy, but they're spending $88 a month on this. And they get a new one every time a new one comes out. I know people that tell me they can't afford to get a business started. They've always wanted to start a business, but they can't afford it. But they're driving around in a brand new Mercedes or a brand new BMW, costing them $800 to $1,200 a month in lease payments, finance payments. It's about priority. So if you want a sovereign life, you have to decide what your priorities are. And once you decide them, don't fucking whine about them. If you say, I want that Mercedes because that Mercedes is that important to me, then when somebody asks you to go do something, you don't have the money, you have to come to terms with the fact that, hey man, I just really like my car. And so I've put all my money into that. So I don't have the money to go do this thing with you. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that doesn't align with you, then you have two choices. Make a lot more money so that you have a little bit more excess, or get rid of the car. When I started Heroes, I drove a brand new 2019 BMW, 2018 BMW. It was with insurance, about $1,100 a month. About 3 months in, I realized that $1,100 was being robbed from my company. My ability to pay into my company, to build what I want to build, to have the money to travel, be there for my people, build a community. I was pouring into a car. It's a nice car. I like the car. I miss the car often. It was a lot of fun. But I don't miss it more than what Heroes has become. Now I drive a 1990 Nissan that has an oil leak like no other. It has a fucking camber knock in the back. It needs a lot of love and attention. But that car cost me about $100 a month. Whereas the BMW cost me $1,100 a month, just so I can feel cool. So it's about your priorities. So if you want sovereignty, figure out what you care about. And don't let other people move your needle to things that you don't care about. Right? I have a buddy, he spends about $200 a month on Gucci wallets. He has probably 30 at one time, at any given time. The way I look at it is I got one pocket. The fuck do I need 30 wallets for? And if the wallet costs more than the money in the wallet, what the fuck do I need a wallet for? That's my perspective. But for him, his perspective is that's what he's working for. He wakes up every day, goes to work, earns his money so that at the end of the month, he can buy himself a Gucci wallet. Different perspectives. But he chose that. My buddy also doesn't sit back and go, man, I wish I could have a nice car. Because he knows if he wants a nice car, the amount of wallets he buys throughout the year would be a car payment. So prioritize. And so one of the things that I want to end this on is you've identified your outcome. What do you want, right? Where are you trying to go? You've identified what it's actually going to cost, right? You've backed into that and said, okay, it's going to cost me $1,000 a month to actually live that life, or $100,000 a month to actually live that life. You've put in all the factors that are a hurdle, right? Whether that's I have kids, I have a job that I hate, I have responsibilities, I have a skill set mismatch, right? That's me. When I say I want to take the business to the top, I have a skill set mismatch. So I'm constantly putting my time into learning and investing in myself to learn. That's just the reality of what I know. So you have those three things. We talked about life coming in and kind of knocking you and like kind of coming in sideways. The last thing that I want to leave you guys with is be willing to recalibrate. I gave the story about the car. When I bought the car, I was well off. I didn't have a business. I didn't have any expenses. I was working a lot, like 10, 15, 20 hours a day, depending on what I was doing, traveling all the time, getting, payments from a day job for travel time and all this stuff. So I had excess cash. Then when I started my business, that excess cash was in a car. Well, that didn't serve me. So I recalibrated. Right? What was a priority became recalibrated. What was important to me got recalibrated. So this isn't one of those things where it's like, okay, you need to set it and forget it. You need to set it and revisit it often. For me, I do it once a quarter. Am I still moving towards what I want to do? That's my frequency. And the reason it's once a quarter is because if I did it once a week or once a month, which I know some people that do have that frequency, I know myself, I'd be chasing my tail. Because I have a lot of things I want to accomplish. If I change my mind and trajectory every week, I'm never going to get where I want to go. So for me, quarter works, right? I'm not going to have enough information early on a week after to know if I need to recalibrate. That's me personally. And in 3 months, I'll have enough information to know if I'm on the right path. I'll have enough metric data to know, like, okay, I overspent this month. I underspent this month. I have a little excess this month. These things came out of the woodwork in the last 3 months. Am I making enough money? Am I spending enough time, right? I have data to support the recalibration, but that's my frequency. So recalibrate often. And when you recalibrate, try and get away from the permission-based systems, right? Like, I love being in the woods, but I notice for myself, I will sometimes tell myself I can't go do that because I'm supposed to be doing this other thing over here. Right. And it's my list. Right. I want to go to the gym, but I want to be in nature. I got to get to the gym and lift for 2 hours because I have to do that. Well, why can't I choose that my workout is going to be in nature? Now I'm killing two birds with one stone. So when you're recalibrating, make sure it's your voice you're listening to. Right. Everything's on the table. And Tish taught me this, and we talk about this pretty often, is I'm an all or nothing kind of person, right? If I want to pick up and leave, I pick up and leave forever. Like, I don't just go and microdose stuff. And Tish is always kind of the voice of reason of like, why don't you just go for a day? Like, why don't you just go for a weekend? And then I'm always like, yeah, why don't I just go for a weekend? That's stupid. Why did I make it this all or nothing thing? So, realize that there's no rules. There's no all or nothing. You can plug and play things in there without, as long as it doesn't affect the overall goal, right? Like earlier I mentioned partying and drinking or whatever. If you account for that and you're like, I want to spend $200 a month drinking and having a good time and partying, going to clubs and paying for covers and spending time with my friends, and that's important to you, don't let anybody tell you it's a waste of money. That's your priority. Right? But you have to take a responsibility for that and say, this is my priority. I'm going to spend $200-$300 a month doing these things. I'm going to spend, $100 a month on wallets. Whatever it is, that's your thing, and own it and be confident in that decision. It's not locked in stone. If you change your mind, you're like, you know what, I've done this for a while and I hate it. I don't like not having money. Then you can change it, but don't let somebody come in and be like, that's stupid. Why would you spend that money on drinking? Which I see a lot of in social media, right? Don't party. Well, I like to party, but you're not going to get the same results, right? So that calibration piece is part of sovereignty, right? You have to realize there's, actually, we talked about it in the portal today with Matt's post, right? Like, when you set out on a course of action, you're closing off the other opportunities. You have to come to terms with that. That's part of making that decision. It closes some doors. Now, the thing that I always tell people is that doesn't mean you can't reopen those doors. But be clear on what you want and which doors matter. Because if you're just running through the hallway, opening doors, you're never going to get to the end of the hallway. You're just going to end up down rabbit holes and chasing your tail and starting marathons every 1 mile, right? Which I talk about, shiny penny syndrome. Oh, I need Bitcoin. Oh, I need artwork. Oh, I need NFTs. Oh, I need to do stock market. Oh, I need to build a business. Oh, I need to drink. I need to. It's not going to get you anywhere. So just, when it comes to finance, build a plan. Stick to the plan as long as works for you from a frequency standpoint, but recalibrate often. Because the beginning of the plan will have certain data set, and by the time you recalibrate, you'll have new data. Right? I've never heard of a single successful person not recalibrating on new data. Right? That would be the same as like when I learned to read and set a plan because now I know basic elementary reading, and then never learned another word again and expected my life to be, a writer. It's like, well, you can't do it off the base information data set. You're going to have to expand your data set. You're going to have to expand your language. You're going to have to expand your ability to speak. You're going to have to expand your ability to write. And maybe by the time you get to the end, you're like, fuck, I don't want to be a writer. I hate this. Now that I know what a cacophony is, I hate writing. Right? When it was, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, I'm a writer. I'm excited to write. But when I have to get into multi-chapter epilogue, prologue novels, fuck this. I don't want to be a writer. That's part of the recalibration process. And that's part of being sovereign, is realizing, what you start out the journey on, you may not be at the end. But just keep going. Right? And I kind of took that into more of a life lesson than a finance lesson because it applies across the board. But, that's kind of the beauty of Heroes, is everything is cross-utilitarian. Everything can be used elsewhere. So I know I had a couple questions. One was, how do I get started? And what's a good savings? I think we covered how do I get started. You got to just sit down and write it down. You got to figure out where you want to go and break it down. As far as savings goes, it comes down to, I know the general rule of thumb is like you need to be able to have enough savings to survive at least 1 to 2 years without a job. I agree that that's a great idea and that's a great goal. But not everything needs to have like an amazing savings to start, right? If you just want to fish all the time, like you don't need a fat savings to go fish. You just need a pole and some bait and then some time. And then another question was prioritizing activities. How do you know what is important and what isn't important? That's part of that learning process. That's why we recalibrate, right? Like that's why we, that's why the recalibration process is important, because, at the beginning, you may think one activity is super critical. And by, a couple weeks in, you're like, that was a stupid priority. Like, that's not going to help me. Or maybe you get that priority a lot quicker than you thought. And now you have to recalibrate because you've already achieved the goal, right? I did this when I was doing my day job. I told my boss I wanted to make 6 figures in 5 years. I did it in 2. And then I spent 6 months lost because I was like, well, now what? Because I didn't have this system of, recalibrating. And so it isn't always just, it doesn't work. Sometimes you need to recalibrate because it happens sooner than you thought. Heroes is a prime example of that. We have a member portal after 3 months. When we first talked about it, we said it wasn't going to be for 5 years because it's going to cost us too much. We found a way to do it. And then as a team, we had to go back to the drawing board. And it's like, okay, we did it. Now what? So how you prioritize activities is going to be very unique to your situation where you're trying to go. But just if you execute on calibration systems, if you execute on not sticking to one thing, identifying what works, what doesn't work quickly, and moving on to the next topic or next skill set, prioritization is not that critical. It's just get intentional about prioritizing. All right. Before, oh, I got one more question. How do you start a finance conversation with a partner so it doesn't turn into an argument? Part of this is very difficult. And I can speak from experience, like this is very difficult because when it comes to partner conversations, you bring baggage on both sides. And as a man, my ego is very much wrapped into money. Like my ability to provide very much is wrapped into money. And so when questioned or doubted, or when conversation about money arises, I have a hard time kind of stowing that arrogance and that ego. And I know many men who maintain a masculine presence, traditional masculine identity of like, I'm the caregiver, I'm the provider, I'm whatever. This is a very difficult thing to overcome. I think first and foremost, you have to make sure that you're a partnership. Where that conversation has to come from is understanding each other's priorities, because you're going to have conflicting priorities. Understanding who's giving up what, who's willing to give up what, and which things they're not willing to give up, right? Like, for example, for me, if I had a partner tell me I had to stop paying for gym because they don't see the point, I'm never giving that up. Like, I'm always going to be paying for a gym membership because that's my outlet. That's where I stay healthy. So that would be a value system mismatch, right? And so not getting angry when they ask you to do that, right? Like, just because somebody says, hey, you should probably do this, doesn't mean you have to abide by that. But there has to be some understanding that you're not going to get everything you want, right? And I've heard a couple of different processes for this. So when starting the conversation, to circle back to the original question, it has to come from a place of love and wanting the same thing, right? So if you don't even know where you guys are going, the first conversation is becoming intentional about where you're going, right? Like, if one person just wants to live in the moment and the other person wants to plan for a $50,000 big purchase, well, then you guys are going to budget severely differently. Like, you guys are going to be the antithesis of each other. And so, really identifying what you want and where you want to go is going to be super critical to that conversation. And where possible, try to write it down in a visceral way, not an emotional way, right? Be very clear about, I want this because it'll serve these things, so that when you guys approach the conversation, it isn't somebody going, well, I feel that this is more important. Well, that's not really data that's going to support anything. You're just kind of putting your emotions above somebody else's, and vice versa. So, it's a very complicated conversation. And I don't want to say that I'm an expert on that space, because I, as I mentioned, have my own hurdles with that. But from my experience, that's definitely been what has served me the best, is becoming very clear on the direction. And then once the direction is figured out, a lot of the conversation is easier because it takes out a lot of the emotion. Authenticity, honesty. In my early days, I wouldn't speak my truth because I was afraid of hurting their feelings or being judged or things like that. And it turned into resentment. It became a problem. So just being open with each other, try and take as much emotion out of it as possible, because if you're in a proper partnership, if you're actually in a space where both of you want to see each other win, then it shouldn't be about winning against each other. It should be winning together as a couple and reaching goals that you both agree on. And I think kind of pulling from some other data that I've heard is, like, you have to realize too, like, what is the urgency? What is the priority? It's okay for one person to get a bigger win, right? I'm trying to think of the wording here. So like if they want something and I want something different, but theirs is a higher urgency or priority, it's okay for me to kind of table my stuff for a while so that they can get theirs. But where most couples fail at this is when it comes time to switch roles and switch back, they don't. And I think the most common example I see of this is like women who help men get through school in the hopes that once the man goes through school, it switches, and then the man supports her getting through school, and then it never happens. That's a very common example I see. And you just have to be very honest about like the fact that, you know, you got to deliver whatever you guys agree upon, you have to deliver on it. So again, I'm a little out of my element with that, but I think from my experience, that's really what it's about, is really just communicating honestly, getting it written down, taking out emotion, and just partnering and not making one person's things over the other, not judging each other, right? Like if a woman says, hey, I need my hair done and it costs $150 a month, you know, I need it. Otherwise I feel like I'm going to be a really bad person. You know, I might be sad, I might be depressed, I might be insecure, whatever. Take that into account, right? You don't have to agree with the priority, but if they're saying it's a need, then, you know, and you care for that person, you should probably listen for understanding rather than just telling them it's stupid, which I hear a lot of people do too. So I hope I answered that question. I know I was a little all over the place because it's a little outside of my realm of expertise, but I appreciate the question. All right. Before we go, any other questions on the call? Anything anybody wants to add?
You hit it out of the park, bud.
Glad to hear. So if you guys,
yeah, fine. I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
say, finance is always a tough conversation to have with yourself, but also in relationships with partnerships and stuff too. So it's just as valuable a piece of identity and ownership of you know, picking out your car. You know what I mean? Like it's important to know what you want and what you don't want. And as you've talked about already, you know, the values behind that, the priorities behind that, and then changing it. You know, it's okay to change. You know, right now I like pink. You know, in next year maybe it's green, but understanding that it's okay to make those changes and to flow with it. You know, as we grow, we are not the same person we were yesterday. We do not have the same desires and goals that we had yesterday from what we want today or for tomorrow. So giving everybody themselves grace with this topic, because it usually does trigger a whole lot of baggage from childhood and past relationships and, you know, whatever goes with that. But again, the ability to roll and flow and you know, we said in the beginning of the conversation that there's never enough money. It doesn't matter how much money somebody has. You know, the top 1%ers will still say the same thing of like, man, I wish I had X amount of dollars so I could do this next project. Okay, well, you know, the person who's, you know, on assistance or, you know, barely scraping through you know, at an entry level position, you know, you make do with what you have, and you find your way. Like you said, you shared an apartment with 3 people. You make your way. You find out what's important, and you do it. And then as you grow, you increase. And you know, like I think a big challenge being, you know, the older person is that kids today, and I see it, you know, with in kids today, young people, they want what their parents wanted. Well, their parents worked 40 years to get what they had. And the 20-year-old starting out in the world is like, well, but mom and dad have this and that, and a nice house, and a nice car, and whatever. But they've missed the fact and the lesson of it took them 40 years to get it. And they want it right now. So again, that piece of like, you know, what's important and understanding, like just because somebody else you see has something doesn't mean that you don't know the story behind it. You don't know if it took them 40 years to get it, or what they were willing to sacrifice to get it. So keeping everything in perspective for yourself in the moment, for the day, for the current time period, is what will help um, put into perspective finances for everybody in every level. It's just one more thing. We all put our underwear on the same way. We all have struggles with money. Um, and we all have to make choices as to what's going to work best for ourselves and our families and our partnerships. So grace
I think
with each
there's,
other, I guess, is my biggest lesson.
yeah, I think there's two things in that really, I think you hit very well, which is one, patience to cut your teeth, to earn the things that you want, right? It's not going to happen overnight. But two, realizing that, part of the journey is it's just as important to find out what you don't want.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, talking about the post that we talked about where Matt had posted about Jim and being clear on what you want out of it, you're shutting doors, right? And sometimes you shut a door and you realize, actually, I didn't want to shut that door. And you have to kind of take a step back and go back and recalibrate. Or maybe you opened a door that you didn't want. Like, this is not what I thought this was. I'm out, and it's okay. But going back to that statement, I think they go hand in hand, is like, if just because you took a year in one door, it doesn't always carry over to another door, right? When I was in art school, I had IT experience and I was making $50,000 a year at the time, doing IT. And when I was doing art, I told them I wanted to be a game designer. And they're like, well, median game designer entry level is 20,000. So are you willing to lose $30,000 to switch that career because you don't have experience? I was like, but I have this IT experience. They're like, it's not transferable.
Yeah.
They want to see 20, they want to see 5, 6, 10 years of game designer experience, not 5, 6, 10 years of IT experience. Some skills are transferable. So part of that conversation is, am I willing to sacrifice in order to go back to something that I love, because I've been on this path and I realize it's not for me, right? I've held 12 careers at my day job. And the one I took before I started Heroes, I took a pay cut because I went from a job that I had done for a long time, knew it very well, had a reputation for knowing it very well, but I got bored because I knew it so well. I was just like, there's nothing more to learn here. There's nothing more to develop here. I've developed all of it. I'm the go-to guy. I'm the owner of it all. Fast forward, took a new job within the same company, but a new job. And they're like, dude, you don't know any of this. So you're going to have to take a pay cut. I'm like, fair enough. But I was bored over there and I want happiness over here. Can I afford to take that pay cut? And I could, so I took it. And I was happier about it because I got a much better leadership team. I got the fulfillment of learning something. But sometimes I think people get stuck because they realize too late that they don't like it, and they feel that they can't go back. Right? And it's like, you can go back. It's just, you have to be willing to sacrifice some of the pieces to go back. So those are great points, Tish, about that. Not knowing what you don't want as well is just as important as knowing what you do want.
And not knocking yourself and taking it as a piece of failure. Like some people, to your story about taking the pay cut, some people might perceive that for themselves as a failure. Like, oh, I was at this level of whatever skill set, money, prestige, and for the sake of a better lifestyle, I'm taking this lower cut. Well, are people going to see me as like, oh, well, what happened? Did you get knocked off a peg? Like, what you failed at something? Like it's sometimes our own hurdles that we put in front of ourselves of like, well, I guess I'll just stay in this dead end, no end serving, position for the sake of, what the Joneses are going to say about me. But getting yourself into a place of comfort of like, no, I really want to do whatever the thing is that I really want to do. Like my heart is a preschool teacher. Preschool teachers don't make money. Like they do it out of the love of it, right? So you're never going to make money as a preschool teacher. But I would spend all day, every day. I would give my time up, which is my biggest asset. I would give my time for free to have that ability to just sit with little people. So if and I would not see it as a business owner now. I would not see that as a regression to be like, well, I'm going to leave the business, where supposedly society says I'm doing the thing. I'd rather sit in the mud with a preschool kid and like have a good day and eat mud pies than than make, you know, money and have the accolades of, oh, I'm a business owner. So sometimes people perceive that as failures when it's really actually like an ownership and a value add to your life, to the time, because that's the only thing that you have is your time. We all end up in the same spot, 6 feet under
Yep.
or in a
And
can.
that's the beauty of
So,
that authenticity, right? Like when you know what you want, when you know where you're going, when you know what you're trying to achieve, those conversations end differently.
mm,
Right? Like I've had people, like when I started Heroes, they're like, well, you have this great job, right? Because I do. And they're like, are you going to keep both? And I was like, as long as I can, but my retirement plan is not my day job. And for people whose retirement plan is the day job, it legitimately makes them short circuit. They like just cannot fathom that I'm willing to give up this amazing job, which I do love my job, but not as much as changing the world with Heroes. It just doesn't align. And I don't argue with them. I was like, I can see why you see that, but that's not why I'm here. Very much to your example, Tish, of like, I'd give it all up to go play with littles in the mud for free, you know? It's okay when you're authentic, it becomes okay to be challenged because you don't take it as personally. You're just kind of like, no, that's your perspective and that's cool, but I'm on this path and this is what I want for me. You can do whatever you want to do and that works for you and that's okay. And it's no longer that, I don't know, it kind of takes the sting away from the judgment a little bit.
absolutely.
Yeah, everybody needs to find their own path and don't worry about how society will look at it, you know. I mean, I've been, you know me, I've been a business owner and things before, and when you approached me with this, I was embarking on my own thing, and I saw something in your vision that made me want to be a part of it and grow with it and make it come to fruition. But I mean, still, my ultimate goal is, you know, I'll find myself on a handful of acres, small cabin, splitting wood until the day I get called home.
And I think that's the beauty of Heroes, right? And I'm gonna kind of take this a different route. Like that's one of the greatest things about what we're building is that exists in our space. Right? The point of the vision is to be dream builders. Right? The entire point is to create a space that edifies and proves that it's possible to live a dream whether society likes it or not. And so when it comes to Heroes, like the whole impetus behind Heroes is to go, okay, what do you want? And where does that fit? If you can answer those two questions with Heroes, we have a place for you. Right?
You know,
and it may not be immediate, but it will be inevitable. Like we will have those things for you. And so when you keep that kind of mindset on the line of like, I'm going to be on this acreage, waking up, splitting wood and doing that every day. And in the meantime, talking with people, helping people, because I like to do that too. Then I now create a legacy based on a dream builder. Mm-hmm. And because I'm a legacy dream builder, other people get to be dream builders under my dream, right? Like that's the whole power of dreaming is if you're willing to wake up and go and do it, you're making it possible for others to have that same experience, right? And that's, in my opinion, that's the infinite game of Heroes. It's what Disney does so well. It's what, you know, Hollywood has done so well, is they've created a space where it's like, if you can dream it, we can do it. Here's all the proof that they can do it. So if you can see yourself in this space, then you can do it. I want us to have that same level with, you know, less of the bullshit. Like right. I want us to have that same experience where it's like, we are traditionally valued here. Like we believe in a certain moral decorum. But as long as you fit within that moral decorum, sky's the limit.
Well, the big difference between Heroes and Disney and Hollywood is when you leave their fun park, the ride's over. The playtime, the imagination, the pretend time's over. Where with Heroes, you learn how to become sovereign and take that with you when you leave and live your sovereign life on your own terms. You know, we give you that. So they don't give you that. We'll give you that.
Yeah. 100%.
It becomes an investment in self, whereas like Disneyland is an investment in time, with that time with whoever you're sharing that time and space with,
Yeah.
even if it's just others in the park. But Heroes becomes an investment in yourself. So,
Yeah.
you know, very much so talking with finance, and the topic of the day is that you know, coming and spending time with us, whether it's in the portal or coming and spending time with us when we have our acreage, it's about bettering yourself for whatever the next tomorrow is. And that investment in yourself is just as important as an investment into a savings account, you know, that had foldable or, you know, jingle coins and whatever. It's like investing in yourself is the priority in one way or the other.
And it's a multiplier, right? Like,
Absolutely.
the thing that I love about what we're building and what we would, you know, to your point, Matt, what is different from a Disney or a Hollywood is like, you may invest that 2 hours into watching a movie and get nothing out of it. You may invest 3 days at Disneyland and yeah, you had a great time and you spent it well and it made memories. When you leave, it stays there.
Yeah.
Right. And it stays in your memory and it doesn't really do anything. But when you spend time at Heroes and you're in the environment and you build these skills, it doesn't just afford you the time that you're there. Everyone you come into contact from then forward are now multiplied by your experience. You now become a launch pad for other people's greatness as a result of Heroes. And I think that's what makes us very unique is we're not just building a place where you can come and enjoy yourself. We're building a place where you come, you enjoy yourself, and you leave as an embodiment of that enjoyment. And then that ripples out to the world around you. And you now become a legacy in your own right because you spent time at Heroes. And that becomes your legacy, right? Is all these microcosm legacies and communities outside of our place.
Well, what is Heroes but a North Star, a beacon of light? And when you come and spend time with us and you learn these things with us, you spend, you know, we give you the knowledge and the values of our experience from this, and you go off on your own and you take a little bit of that light with you, and now you become a beacon for others.
Yeah, 1000%. This is a very great unscripted conversation.
So much love.
Like
oh my gosh. Now we just need our marketing director that can pick all these pieces out and help us put it into our storytelling, because all of that we just said in the last 20 minutes was gold nuggets.
Yeah. I really do believe like that is the power, right? Because if you talk to anybody that's been on the team for any length of time, that's how they feel. They may have their own unique perspective, right? Like Matt's like, I'm going to split wood and hang out on acreage. Tish is like, I'm going to play with the littles in the mud and the rope course. You know, like everybody's going to have their own thing.
Yep.
But at the heart of it, the core of it is everybody feels that we're building something sustainably substantial, not just a moment in time where you can look back and be like, that was great, right? It's like, I have that moment in time to then go, and because I did that, I can now be greater still. And that to me is just amazing.
Well, the people that come and stay at the ranch with us will, you know, when they leave, they may fall back into their old habits and things, but one day they may wake up, get ready for work, and as they're sitting in their cubicle, think back and go, I wonder if that old guy is splitting wood today on that ranch. And they'll be able to pull up a live cam or something and
I
go,
was just going to say live cam.
There he is. There he is. And that's all he wanted to do. And he's talking to people as he's doing it, and he's helping people and showing and teaching values and skills. And then he gets on his horse and he rides around the ranch. You know,
it's such a beautiful moment to think about. Like I'm a vision person, right? Vision. I don't like saying visionary because it seems a little pretentious, but like I'm a person who can envision things, right? Like, and I just imagine this moment where it's fog laid ground and you just see Matt out there splitting wood, and the silence of the morning is just split by the crack of wood every 30 seconds or so. And every morning you hear that and it becomes this morning cadence of just that moment of that crack. And then there's this kind of like somber reminder that one day that crack won't be there. And that in itself is the legacy that you leave. Right. And like that, those are the moments I want to create where people come to rely on those moments. They come to rely on that cadence. And then it's a hole when it's not there. And
Well,
so
that'll be
somebody
my
will feel the
headstone.
need to fill it.
My
Somebody
headstone will
will
just
have
be
to
a
take up
double
that
bladed
mantle.
axe and a stump and a camera. Everybody can pull it up and see it. And, yeah, he was there. And
Yep.
one day somebody will come along and they'll pull that axe out of that stump and they'll start splitting wood.
Yep. And that's the beauty of it all, right? Like that, if you think about a hero's journey, that's the piece that our society lacks now. Everybody wants to be the hero, but they don't want to come back to the community and show
Right.
them what they know and have them take up that mantle of hero. And that's what we bring to the table, is we give them that opportunity to take up that mantle. But they're not alone, right? Like they're not by themselves. They have a community behind them that's like, hey, this is how you take up the mantle. This is why we take up the mantle. This is how we take up the mantle. And this is how you one day leave that gap for somebody to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time as much as I love this conversation. As always, this recording will be up today or tomorrow within the next 24 to 48 hours. So anybody that's watching after the fact, if you have any questions, if anything resonated with you, please feel free to take to the community portal, share it, ask your questions. We're always in there to answer and connect with all of you. And if you as a member find that people that could really take up that mantle with us, as we were just talking about, shoot them an invite, get them in the portal. As we grow, the more people we have, the better off we are at being that North Star. So thank you, everybody that joined. Thank you for the great questions. And, thank you, Matt and Tish, for having a great, deep conversation about kind of where we're going. I think it's very important. And we'll see you all in the portal. Talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.